Right, I just cooked my ham and eggs. I'm going to have a hearty breakfast of ham and eggs. It actually reminds me of a story. In my hometown of Perth, Ontario, Canada, the last man to be hanged publicly was hung on a gallows in front of the courthouse on Drummond Street in Perth. And the sheriff's house was across the street from the courthouse. The jail was actually on Beckwith Street, which was behind the courthouse. That jail closed in 1994. But this was in the 1800s that this hanging occurred. And I used to work at the Perth Museum, and I actually saw pictures of the gallows, and there was a carnival set up going all down the street behind the gallows, because it used to be a real celebratory atmosphere when they'd have a hanging. You know, people would come from all over to witness it. And they'd have a carnival, and then they'd shut the carnival down and have the hanging, and then they'd go back to their merriment after the guy was dispatched. Anyway, this particular person, though, I'll tell you, just in case I run out of room here, I want to tell you this part. When I worked at the museum, at one point I actually had a wallet made out of the man who was hanged in front of the courthouse. I actually had a wallet made out of his skin in my hand. Because after he was hanged, they turned his body over to the tanner, and they tanned his hide, and they sold little 2-inch by 2-inch squares of leather made from his hide, and they also made some wallets and whatnot that they sold. A little piece of leather made from his hide, I believe, cost, well, I can't remember now exactly, but it wasn't very much in today's money, but at that time it was a lot of money. It was like so many weeks' wages for a laborer. I can't remember just what now, but anyway, it might have been $2 for a little 2-inch by 2-inch square of leather or something. It was a lot of money back then anyway. I can't imagine what a wallet made out of the skin would cost. But I actually had to take a wallet made out of that man's skin down to where we stored our artifacts and put it in dry storage. And I remember doing that anyway. And I actually held that wallet in my hand, you know, made out of a condemned murderer's skin. Anyway, the story goes, this fellow, what he had done is, he had went through his cabin. He was a settler, you know, a homesteader, you could say. He went through his cabin with a hatchet, and he murdered his family. Took the hatchet to his wife and to all of his children. But when he came to his little boy, who was just a toddler at the time, he didn't have the heart to do it. The little boy actually woke up and looked up at him, and they couldn't do it. The rest of the family never knew what hit them. They were asleep when he killed them. But anyway, the little boy woke up, and he didn't have the heart to kill him. And so he picked him up out of the bed and carried him outside. Now, this child was only like maybe 2 years old, somewhere in there. He was just small, just a toddler. Anyway, he carried his son outside, and he went back into the cabin, and he busted a coal oil lantern and started a good fire, burned the cabin to the ground. Well, in those days, of course, a coal oil lantern, there were lots of fires caused by things like that, by people knocking over lanterns and things. So the authorities really didn't think anything of it. They didn't question it. And in fact, he was treated like a hero. Everybody felt sorry for him, and they were treating him really well because they figured, you know, the poor man lost his home and his family. And, shit. Okay. I just lost part of my egg there, but anyway. That's the best part, too, the yolk. Anyway, I hope I don't lose another yolk. I want at least to have 2 of my yolks intact. Anyway, what happened was they were treating him like a hero, and they couldn't do enough for him because he'd saved his little boy from this terrible fire and stuff. The neighbors down the road took the little boy in and raised him. But the little boy, he was talking. And he was trying to tell the neighbors that had taken him in about how he had woke up with his dad standing over him with a hatchet, and that his dad had picked him up and carried him outside, and had and his dad had put him on the ground outside and then went back into the house, and then the fire started. And at first they didn't want to hear it, and they were punishing him for talking like that, because they didn't want to hear that. But eventually they looked at it and they said, well, the kid won't shut up about it, and we've really been hard on him when he's been talking about these things and everything, and so maybe we need to take him seriously. And so they went to the sheriff with their concerns, and the sheriff, he went out to where the rooms of the house, and he found a hatchet head in the ashes, and he dug up the mother of the family, the man's wife, and she had a wound in her skull, it turns out, that the hatchet head fit into perfectly. So the man was arrested, charged with murder, tried, convicted, and sentenced to hang. Well, there were threats made against him. People in the community were furious with him because they felt like he had really duped them, which he kind of had, And so they were basically saying, we'll tear the SOB apart before you get him to the gallows. If they kept him in the jail until his hanging, they would have had to walk him from the jail down Beckwith Street, around the corner, up the hill, turn the corner onto Drummond, and then walk him down Drummond to the gallows. Well, if they'd done that, chances are he wouldn't have made it to the gallows alive. There'd have been nothing left of him to hang. So what the sheriff did is he snuck him out of the jail the night before his hanging, and the sheriff put him into his house. So the sheriff kept the man in his house overnight. The gallows was erected on the street in front of the sheriff's house. The opposite side of the street was the courthouse. Well, the sheriff, what he did is, in the morning, he fed the man a hearty breakfast of ham and eggs. And that's recorded as part of the record that the sheriff wrote. He said that he fed the prisoner a hearty breakfast of ham and eggs, and then he led him out to be hanged. And what he did is, he actually took planks, and he made a walkway. When it was time for the hanging, he laid the planks out across from the upstairs window of his house over to the gallows. So, and then he just walked the man out across the planks to the gallows where he'd be hanged. And that's what happened anyway. That's how they did it. The hangman was a prisoner from the Brockville jail. Brockville's another town about 50 miles from here, south of here, right on the St. Lawrence Seaway. They made a deal with a prisoner from the Brockville jail that if he'd be the one to do the hanging, then he'd get a pardon. So they brought a prisoner down from the Brockville jail who's never been identified. Nobody to this day knows who that prisoner was. He'd be long gone now, of course. But he's the one who actually pulled the lever and sprung the trap on the man who had killed his family and burned his house down. Anyway, after the hanging, the crowd was so vindictive, that wasn't enough. Yeah, we busted the guy's neck and killed him, but no, that's not enough. So they decided to turn his body over to the tanner, and they made his hide into leather, and I've told you the rest of the story anyway. And in the mid-1980s, around 1986 it would have been, because we built the new addition onto the museum in 1986, and we were transferring all our artifacts into a climate-controlled storage area in the basement of the new addition in 1986. So that's when it would have been. I was 18 years old, and I worked part-time at the museum, and I worked full-time at Central Wire, which was a wire factory in Perth. Worked the 4 to midnight shift at Central Wire, and I worked part-time at the Perth Museum. Anyway, I had to take a wallet made out of that man's skin and bring it down to our new climate-controlled storage area. And also I had to do the paperwork. I had to basically, in those days we didn't have a computer, because computers weren't really a thing in 86 like they are now, and there was no internet or anything. But the computer was just basically glorified book typewriter and bookkeeping machine and word processor is all a computer was, and you could play a few games on it or whatever, video games, but that was about it. And so we didn't have one, but we had a filing system where we had index cards, and we had photographs of the artifacts, and we had a description listed there, and we had, of course, everything was numbered so we could find it, and so on, so we didn't lose an artifact. And anyway, I had to do the paperwork, basically, make sure that the photographs were there, and make sure the paperwork was filled out on the artifact, and then take it down and put it into the storage area. So that's the story anyway. That was my job, and that was one of the things I had to do. Was I had to take this wallet made out of that man's skin down to the storage area. Yeah, it was kind of pink. It was like a pink leather, and it was still very soft. Like it was still very pliable and stuff. It hadn't hardened up like leather often does. Pretty creepy though. I can't say I would really want to own something like that, but yeah. Anyway, that building itself had a lot of weird things happening in it. We always used to say it was haunted, and we had reason to say that. Trust me on that. With things like that in there, it'd be little wonder, though, Anyway, that's it for now. That's a story for you about the last man hanged in Perth, Ontario, Canada, publicly. There were other hangings after that took place inside the jail. But that particular fellow, I can't think of his name now, but I wish I could think of it, but I can't. I know there was a fellow by the name of Weedmark that was hanged, but I think he was hanged in the jail after they'd stopped doing public hangings. I don't think that was him, and I just can't remember the man's name now. It might have been Easby. For some reason, the name Thomas Easby comes to mind, but so his name might have been Easby, but I'm not 100% certain of that now. I just can't remember. It was a long time ago that I dealt with all that stuff. But for some reason, just thinking about it, the name Thomas Easby came to mind, and I'm almost certain that was the name of the guy, but I'm not 100%. That might have been the name of somebody else maybe there was another artifact that I dealt with or something that had that name connected to it. I don't know. Anyway, that's it for now. We'll talk to you later.